Welcome to Forward Progress on the Hammer Betting Network on this Monday, January 22nd. Today, we're going to be talking about the divisional weekend fallout and what the losing teams might do this offseason, and our first look preview of the AFC and NFC Championship weekend. Do me a favor, like and subscribe to the content. It helps boost us in the algorithm, and it's greatly appreciated. Of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsor, Pinnacle. They're the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what the pros have known for the last 25 years. Everyday competitive odds, your trusted sports book. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. I'm joined again this week by Cleve TA, plus EV Better, cleveanalytics.com, Suma Pro Sports Better, creator on the Hammer Betting Network, and Sharp Clark, NFL originator, betting analyst at 4for4.com. Gentlemen, let's get the show on the road. And Cleve, you got yourself into a Twitter brouhaha on Saturday by questioning Bobby Slowick and how good he actually is. Let's talk about it. He's getting head coach looks in interviews. If he were to get a job and get stolen out of Houston, does that hurt the development of Stroud?
I don't think it was a brouhaha. I don't think so. I think a couple people responded, but some people agree with me. I just, in watching, I watch a lot of Houston football, and I think we see this during this sort of hiring cycle where you get, this young coordinator who gets propped up by a rookie quarterback who's obviously going to be in a top tier of quarterbacks going forward. He's already one of the better ones, and it just makes him look a lot better than I think he really is. I know some of his play, again, I'm not a film guy, but I know some of his play designs have been lauded, which is fine. But I just think the way he calls games, I was very unimpressed all season. And there was like a 1 or 2 game stretch. Obviously last week against the Browns, he called a really good game, I thought, which was abnormal because that was not what he, in terms of early down runs versus passes, and just very conservative in every way, and not utilizing, I think, CJ Stroud, his weapon, to the max capability. So I was on the Ravens and I was frustrated watching that game. And one of the reasons why I liked them was because I knew that, and I just predicted that Slowick would come out and be run heavy, try to, quote unquote, protect his rookie quarterback on the road and do all the same kind of cliche things that you would hope you wouldn't see from a more progressive offensive mind. So there's nothing that I saw. And again, I'm not in the locker room. I don't know how he's coached them up. So those things are impossible to answer for me, just from the outside looking in. Nothing I saw out of him independently from CJ Stroud, where I was, so impressed that I thought he should get a head coaching job. And I actually tweeted yesterday, I actually thought Dave Canales at Tampa impressed me a little bit more and kind of improved as the season went along. In all those regards, more than Slowick. But again, I'm not in the meeting rooms. I don't know how much influence a defensive coach like DeMeco Ryans is having on the play calling. I don't know if there's demands to run it more. So those things are just kind of things I don't know about, and teams will find out. But just from the outside looking in, that was my perspective.
Yeah, it also goes to the whole Shanahan tree, right? They're all elite play designers. And sometimes they're questionable play callers, like to the point that they're conservative in situations that they should be aggressive. Clark, do you remember last year Jacksonville had come back against the Chargers, finished the season strong? They lost to the Chiefs and Mahomes, but there was this presumption that, okay, this is their division now. They're going to run things. We all feel pretty good about them. And next year happens and they miss the playoffs. How do you feel about Houston entering the offseason? Do you feel as optimistic as we all did on Jacksonville last year, or do you think, no, this division's way too competitive now?
I mean, I feel as optimistic about the Texans this year as I did about the Jaguars after last year, in the sense that the number one thing you have to solve in your transition from being a bottom tier franchise to a top tier is quarterback, and they solved it. I very much believe in Stroud. The difference is with the Jaguars last year, it was, well, they've got a really crappy division, so all they have to do is stay healthy and they should win the division. It's no longer like that. You've got now at least 2 teams in the Jags and Texans, if not the Colts, if Anthony Richardson also takes a step forward. Shane Steichen's doing a great job over there. So potentially 3 teams competing for the division. And so I'm not as optimistic in the Texans winning the division next year, but not because I don't think they're as good. It's just because this division suddenly got tight.
All right, Suma, if you're the Houston Texans, and there's obviously a lot of positives to build upon, and like, frankly, they got banged up by the time the season ended, and next year they expect to have Tank Dell back and Nico Collins has burst out, and they've got weapons. Their O-line got banged up. What do you do? What do you think their top priority roster-wise should be this offseason? Is there like a glaring need that they have to fix, or is it continue build on the foundation they already have?
Yes and yes. So I think it's building on the foundation that they have on offense. So I would probably go best player available in the draft. And I'm looking at over the cap right now. They have the third most cap space. I think that has a lot to do with all their one-year contract players, especially on defense. So I would assume that they will let go a bunch of players and there will be some turnover on defense. So you have enough cap space to fix some depth along the offensive line and pull it onto the defense. And I would also not hate if they got another weapon for CJ Stroud. Tank Dallas, absolutely phenomenal, has been as a rookie. Nico Collins, I never expected this Nico Collins season, to be honest, because that guy always looked like a straight line runner. But what he did down the field, absolutely incredible. If you can maybe round out that receiving group a little bit, don't know how much Robert Woods will have in the tank, so maybe something in the receiving group. But overall, I think it's pretty much to stabilize the defense, pour more resources into the defense, and then build on that foundation on offense. I mean, it's very easy to say, but if you have that quarterback, everything else is much easier when it comes to roster building.
All right. Let's assume that they do want to build with another weapon. TA, do you nibble around the edges or do you get aggressive and like go get a T. Higgins, like someone that all of a sudden now Nico Collins, T. Higgins, Tank Dell, you really have to over prepare to stop this weapon group? Do you overpile it on, or would you rather resources in other areas of the roster?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the offense proved when everybody was healthy, that's a top 10 offense, and that's and you'd hope that Stroud continues to elevate. So, I mean, I think building on the depth at receiver a little bit more than the top end. I mean, I think Nico Collins, showed that he could be a really good number 2, maybe borderline 1, sort of receiver. You got Tank Dell, who is very specific, kind of down the field guy, can break some tackles, really good after the catch. So I don't think you need to go all out with a T. Higgins. Maybe that's the following season. I think that they need to continue to build the offensive line. I think the offensive line outside of Larry Tunsil has some issues. I think that's one area you can continue to improve. And then I think defensively, I thought D'Amico Ryans did a good job defensively, but they did not play a lot of really tough opponents this year. So I think some of their deficiencies were masked by the level of competition that they faced all year. I mean, if you look at the quarterbacks they faced, it was like Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield, I think, and maybe Trevor Lawrence were the 3 best they faced all year. It was a really weak set of opponents. So I think you can continue to build in the secondary. I think Stingley's a good player, but that's really, Petrie's pretty solid at safety, but I think you can keep adding in the secondary. And I think the pass rush, you always want to add in the pass rush, I think interior defensively too. So I would probably, I don't think you necessarily desperately need a top end wide receiver. I think you just kind of fill in the holes that, I think Noah Brown's a free agent. Robert Woods is over the hill. So you need to fill like those number 3, number 4 roles and then attack the defense and offensive lines, I think.
Yeah. Also, like you got to watch that Bills Chiefs game and say, all right, Josh Allen and Mahomes are in our conference for the next 5-10 years. We're probably going to need a lot of good corners if we're going to beat these teams over the long course. That's something that I thought Jacksonville didn't do a good enough job. And while we were wrong early about their defense, what we all saw in the offseason kind of came home to roost. Howdy brings up an interesting conversation and sticks with the whole Shanahan, play designer, play caller thing. He writes, Devils of avocado for Bobby and the Shanny boys. They say everything is linked together, and so those early down runs are crucial for setting up plays later where people can run wide the F open. Clark, your reaction on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some validity to that. And the reason I say that is because all of the Shanahan version offenses that have done this have been the only offenses outside of Detroit that have propped up a mediocre quarterback, average quarterback, maybe pretty good quarterback, to the point where they're putting up production stats that are similar to some of the elite quarterbacks. And I think as long as you can get that level of production out of your quarterback, granted you're passing less frequently, and that can cause problems when you come up against a really good defense like we saw when San Francisco played against Baltimore. But in terms of putting yourself in a position to succeed week after week against most defenses, I think we have plenty of evidence that what they're doing works. And so I'm inclined to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And we see teams that over leverage into QB passing when the quarterback isn't that good, and it's very, very bad for the team. Passing first is generally good, but it is also high variance. And so when you have a bad quarterback, that high variance can come back to bite you. So I'm a little bit in defense of the Shanahan guys and their run heavy approach because it works, at least in the stats.
You know what maybe gave me pause on that, and up until this point, it's been provided through many examples. O'Connell's from that tree as well, and I thought Minnesota did a very good job transitioning into being more aggressive this year and kind of abandoning the run. When I saw that, I said, what if they can still do all the great play design stuff and be more efficient about early down pass rate? Suma, do you think it's possible and they should think to do it that way, or do you continue to stick with what works?
Yeah, so regarding that, so let's say these guys want to set up things for later in the game. So presenting certain run looks where they use play action off of that. But my question is, so I think it's hard to find the balance between not being badly in terms of efficiency and killing drives and basically making up for that later in the game. Because let's say you want to set up some runs early in the game, but you are facing a tough run defense or a defense that's really keying in on that stuff, and the run game is not working. That means that early in the game, you will likely kill drives, punt the ball several times, and then all the stuff that you wanted to set up for later needs to really bail you out later in the game. And I think it's just hard to sometimes find the balance between setting stuff up but still being somewhat efficient doing so. Another question that comes to mind is, so there are certain concepts that these teams run out of the same look all the time. Like McVay will have like several play action packages where he has like 12 run looks, 12 passing looks out of the same formation, same motion. So that's on tape from the week before. So I would argue that on some of these concepts, you don't need to do anything in the first quarter because teams have that on tape. Teams have prepared for these certain run looks, and they might bite or bait early in the game, despite you not setting that up with running the football. So these are my thoughts on that. I remember, I think it was 2021. It was the season where Jimmy Garoppolo did not get injured. So in that season, the 49ers had a below average rush efficiency on early downs, but they were so superb on play action and passing in second halves that they could make up for that. But they basically killed drives early in the game and then still scored 30 points later because these passing concepts still worked. So I think it's just finding about the balance that works for you.
And I think a couple things real quick, not to interrupt George, but
yeah.
I mean, I think people have to understand, like, no one's saying don't ever run the football. I think the kind of the old football guard gets really upset. No one's saying you need a 99.1% balance here. You're just saying just at some point, instead of just running into a brick wall and it's not really doing anything for your offense, it should be a little bit more balanced. And you've got an elite asset behind center. You don't need to necessarily run the same sort of concepts that you need for a Brock Purdy or a Jimmy Garoppolo or guys who are limited in most other offenses where you need to kind of marry everything to that regard. You don't need to do that with CJ Stroud. He's good enough where he doesn't have to have everything perfect and kind of the concepts be so aligned. So I think there has to be a little bit of flexibility in that regard.
Suma, you have one more counterpoint before we move on to the Packers?
Yes, the comment from Todd Vishnu. So Not say play action works even if you never run it, but that wouldn't be the case if no one ever ran for a reason. Yes, so I think play action can work two ways. A, you are able, and all the Shanahan guys and McVay, etc., try that you make the one game or your run looks and your pass looks completely cohesive. So that you basically have like a package with certain run looks and pass looks off of that. Secondly, and we saw that with the Lions offenses under Matthew Stafford or Peyton Manning, Broncos, that these teams sometimes were at the bottom of the league in terms of rushing efficiency. They could not run the ball. They also did not merge the run game and the passing game very well. But these quarterbacks, for whatever reason, were able to sell the play action fake like better than most other quarterbacks. And that was the reason why, for example, some of the Lions Stafford offenses ranked bottom third or bottom three in rushing efficiency, but top 5 in play action efficiency for like several seasons, because they, for whatever reason, were able to sell the fake, and opposing defenses still bid on that.
Yeah, completely. It's not always correlated. Let's go on to the Packers game, Clark. I'm gonna have a moment of admission for a second here. There were times where I saw Jordan Love like scrambling in the pocket and resetting himself and making some incredible throws with his strong arm. And there was a moment where I said to myself, damn, I'll never get that with Tua, right? There's this Love's physical traits are incredible. They're off the charts good. How sold are you on Love being a top 10 QB moving forward? Because if he's consistent, his ceiling feels like it's as high as almost anybody in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't love doing isolated QB rankings because so much is situation dependent. But I think as long as he's got an offensive line that is playing at the level that his offensive line played at this year, and as long as he has someone scheming up that offense the way LaFleur was this year, I think he's going to be easily top 10. He's got the tools and the talent to navigate the pocket. He feels pressure without looking at it, which is really important. He creates abilities to throw with his arm angles and by fading away from the defender. These things really matter, but I am quite skeptical of whether he'd be able to keep that up if he was under pressure more, if the offensive line didn't hold up, if he didn't have a run game that he could rely on for some of those chunk plays. I think he is potentially one of those quarterbacks that is highly susceptible to differences in the quality of defensive line play. And so I think this is one of those things where I think as long as the circumstances remain, and their weapons should only get better. They're all really young. They were injured this year. They may even improve this receiving core. Luke Musgrave heading into his second year, we know tight ends take a step forward. These young receivers should take a step forward. So I think his situation will be fine. And so heading into this coming year, I'm very optimistic on what Jordan Love will be, but I'm not ready to sign off on him being an elite quarterback the same way that I am with CJ Stroud, because the traits that he's showing are a little bit fragile. And we saw some of that, against San Francisco, like that final play was kind of, him showing some of the cracks that can happen. So I think that might happen more frequently if he's under pressure more. But I see no reason why that would be the case in the near-term future.
I think the fair counterpoint to that is there's maybe like 5 quarterbacks in the NFL that they will survive whether they're under pressure or not. I don't know that he's that good, but I think he's in that pretty damn good discussion. There was a hypothetical that you and Rob talked about that got some conversation going on Twitter. And then we had this conversation and I felt it was a no-brainer. The hypothetical was if Dallas were to offer Dak Prescott and a first-round pick to the Packers for Jordan Love, would the Green Bay Packers accept it? And I thought, no chance. Suma, what do you think if they got offered that hypothetically?
Did you include contracts?
No, here's the thing. With contracts, it becomes clearly a no. But without contracts being factored in, he's 5 years younger with a potentially higher ceiling. Why the hell would you make that Dak's not going to get any better. We've seen a 7 or 8 year sample size. He is who he is at this point right now. And we don't know what Jordan Love is.
In a vacuum, John Love, because like you said, Dak is turning 31 before the next season starts. We know who he is. We have seen some absolute splashes from John Love, and the ceiling is still higher. So give me the upside with Jordan Love, even if we don't have to debate contracts.
Cleve, I'll ask you your thoughts on that hypothetical. And then I wanted to ask you if it's weird that I feel better about Green Bay next year than the Detroit Lions, even though the Detroit Lions are still in the playoffs this year. Is that a weird thing to say?
I don't know if it's weird. I mean, I think the Lions do have, I mean, the Packers have more staying power in the long term because of Love and his age and all these weapons that are brand new. It also depends on what Packers are going to do with some of their cap space. I mean, they've got David Bakhtiari has like a $40 million cap hit, which was pretty amazing. So they're going to have to restructure him, and there's probably ways to open up more cap space. But in the short term, I could see them if they use it right, elevating past Detroit. But Detroit's got just and again, I think the other issue is Ben Johnson's leaving. So maybe you are right in that regard. It depends, how much of an impact is he going to have on that offense? Was he the entire offense? Was it just the system? You could make that argument. So I do think once you marry that with kind of the quarterback situation, Love is probably, in general, absent of system, a better quarterback than Goff. You could probably make that case. It's not like the Lions are littered with young talent all around. It's, especially defensively, they've got some guys, but there's not a ton of upside there. So, I think that you could definitely make the case that for next year that at least certainly they're on similar paths, I think. So what was the first question? Remind me, is that about
would you do Jordan Love for Dak first?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think we got to be careful. So, obviously this entire podcast was on the Packers preseason. We talked about the upside, all the sorts of things. We all, really enjoyed Jordan Love this year. I did. We just have to be careful because everybody just assumes trajectories are straight up, that there is no sort of hiccup. There's no sort of bumps in the road, that, everyone's just going to improve. Like, what would you have thought of Carson Wentz early on? What would you have thought of RG3? Like, I can go on and on. So we have to be careful that we can't just assume that Jordan Love is going to keep getting better and that he's going to be an elite quarterback. You can't. We know that Dak is already a top 8-ish quarterback, if that's fair. And yeah, he's going to be 30, but I don't think 30 in kind of current, times is really that old. You have another 7-ish, 8-ish years that I think could be really productive. So I'll say, I wouldn't do that deal, but I don't think it's as slam dunk. I think absent the contracts as maybe you're making it out to be, just because I can't assume that Love is going to be, to that level consistently. I just can't. So there is a little hesitation in the back of my head because of that. I think we always fall in love with the young, shiny new toy, and it doesn't always end up being, at the end of the day, better than kind of what's stable and what's been proven for a number of years. So I think it's closer than you're making it out to be personally. And I do want to make one thing, and I don't know, maybe Sharp, Clark, you've done this before. There is a pretty sizable gap between Jordan Love's EPA numbers and his success rate. We know a lot of that is some of his high risk nature, explosive plays, all those sorts of things. I don't know how predictive like that is going forward. Do we typically see a convergence going forward, or the next year, or even the next 2 or 3 years? I'd like to look back historically at younger quarterbacks to see if we have that gap. Does that mean anything? Is there anything to conclude there? Because we have seen from Love that, he hits those big plays, but, from a down to down perspective, he's not as consistent. So that's something I want to take a look at in the offseason.
Clark, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, here's why I would take Jordan Love. We know what Dak's ceiling is. And, people say like, well, Dak's been really good for however many years. He's had an elite offensive line, great weapons, and one of the league's best defenses for several years now, and still hasn't made it out of the first round of the playoffs. So we know what Dak's ceiling is. He's not the kind of guy who's going to carry a team to the Super Bowl while weighing down such a big contract. We don't know what Jordan Love's ceiling is. Maybe he regresses. Maybe he turns into a pumpkin, at which point you can cycle through, maybe try again, if you got Dak, you're stuck in potential mediocrity, even if the rest of the team is good for however many years. And I think Jordan Love gets you on the fast track to potentially competing for a Super Bowl, or knowing that you've got to go somewhere else. And so that's why I would prefer to be on Love at this point.
Yeah, it's finding out if he's good enough, and if he's not, you move on. You said the word mediocrity, and we wanted to talk about all these teams, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't want to spend much time on Tampa because they probably want to run it back with Baker and Mike Evans, and I'm just thinking to myself, are they better off than they were like it feels like they are in purgatory, right? They're gonna run it back with Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean and a lot of old guys, but there's no logical next step of progression for them, and they're probably still not bad enough to bottom out, and it feels like it's a misstep. I'd rather focus on the Bills, who like they've been on the cusp of it for so long. I want to know, Suma, this is it, right? 3 years ago when they lost with 13 seconds, it was like, oh, it's okay, we'll get him next year. Well, we're here 2 years later and they still haven't got him. Something has to fundamentally change, right?
Yes, I think so.
Is it the coach? Is it Sean McDermott can't get this team to the next level?
Super tough question. So first of all, I want to remind everyone of Clark's tweet from last night that he's watching the two best quarterbacks in the AFC playing, and I think, or correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was
in the NFL.
Yeah, in the NFL. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So when you have Josh Allen, and I think he had a pretty good game yesterday, I think it will still make things easy for the Bills going forward, because yes, there will be a lot of volatility when it comes to the roster, because their key D guys, or lots of their key D guys will likely leave in free agency. Stephon Diggs might not make it back to Buffalo next year. So I think that this current version of the roster is due for a reset. But I think as long as you have Josh Allen, you still have a pretty high baseline. So let's say Sean McDermott is gone tomorrow. I still think whoever is going to become the next head coach will completely fall in love with Josh Allen being his quarterback. And I think despite all the issues on offense, the coordinator change, and Stephon Diggs being an absolute no-show, we were still talking about a top 8-ish kind of offense over the course of the season in terms of efficiency. There were stretches where they put up like top 3 efficiency numbers. So I think the Bills, yes, they're in for a reset, but we also said that about the Chiefs like 1.5 years ago. So I think as long as they have Josh Allen, they will have a pretty good foundation, and it probably only takes them to find like 1 or 2 wide receivers, and they will come back next season with a top 5 offense, and you just gotta hit some variance on defense.
Cleve, I remember when Peyton Manning could not get over the hump against Brady, and he throws a pick 6 to Asante Samuel, and they go down 21-6 in the AFC Championship game. And I remember going to my bathroom, like putting water on my face and saying, he's just never going to do it, right? And Peyton comes out second half, legendary performance, gets it done, wins the Super Bowl that year. Is this just a matter of like 1 or 2 plays going differently and the Bills are moving on and maybe winning a Super Bowl? Like, do you run it back one more time, or do you think something materially has to change?
I do think they need to change. We're all forgetting, like, it's not Mahomes. What about Burrow last year? They destroyed the Bills. It wasn't even a contest. So that was his chance, and they couldn't get past. So, I mean, we're just going to keep naming. Is next year going to be Herbert? Is the final, like, I get it. Mahomes has been there. That 42-36 game was like a perfect example. Like, they probably beat every other team in the NFL that year. But, he's had other opportunities. It wasn't just Mahomes, and the Chiefs are clearly down this year versus other years. They're not the clear, number 1 seed. You had home field advantage. I don't think there's anything. I mean, Josh Allen's awesome, so this is not discounting him. I think the offense is broken. First of all, to make this like a run heavy offense in the back half of the year showed you that their weapons are a mess. I mean, Stephon Diggs, I went heavy in his under yardage prop yesterday because because the Chiefs are just awesome against number 1 receivers, but B, his efficiency numbers just collapsed since Joe Brady took over, he was like bottom 20 among 75 wide receivers and yards per route. Like and you just saw it. Like he dropped that awesome deep ball yesterday, that one shot that they had to go deep. He just can't get down the field. He can't separate. He's dropping balls. He's afraid to go over the middle. Like there's got to be something done with him. The problem is that his cap number is really bad, and he's 30 years old now. And he's not the greatest locker room guy per se. I mean, for him to put like this close symbol to Josh Allen when that was a perfect ball for him to catch was just a joke. That's just the epitome of kind of what he's been about. So, there's a lot of issues there. I think they need to get more explosive on offense. You've got the guy with the best arm maybe the NFL has ever seen, and you're 20th in explosive pass rate. Why is that? It's you don't have any real options down the field. Gabe Davis is a whatever. He's just kind of a guy. Khalil Shakir is actually just solid as a slot guy. But I made a joke about, man, I would love to see Rashid Shaheed on this team because he's like the perfect guy who probably come cheap.
Yes.
And that would like unleash like an awesome dimension to this offense. So I think they need to increase the kind of the verticality and increase the explosiveness on offense. The offensive line is fine. I guess it's I don't know their cap situation. Defensively, you've got some older guys in the secondary between, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I'm not sure where Rasul Douglas is as if he's a free agent, but you're going to have to replenish the defense. So like and then the Von Miller contract is an albatross. So you've kind of set yourself up you thought that this was going to be the year and maybe last year was going to be a year and you didn't get it done. So they're in a crossroads. So they're going to have to be really creative. They're going to have to make, they're probably not going to be able to rely on rookies. So you're going to have to make, some good quality trades with some of those mid-round picks. And I think that they should get rid of McDermott. I just think that he's kind of proven that he's just not the guy to get him over the top. I joked around. I thought Belichick would have been awesome. Would be awesome there, just because I do think that they need that extra oomph that kind of get him over the top, like from a game plan perspective. And so I would have liked to see him there, but I do think that they definitely need to revamp this offense for sure at minimum.
Imagine a perfect world where Josh Allen had Tyreek Hill as a receiver, and the first time in history you actually had to defend every inch of the field, because that would be a dreamboat pairing. Clark, apparently calling Mahomes the greatest quarterback of all time is a hot take, which I think is insane. I think he's on the trajectory to be the best of all time. It reminds me of in basketball, Michael Jordan ruined a lot of Hall of Fame careers because if not for his 2-year break, Hakeem Olajuwon probably joins the long list of guys that never wins a championship ring. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Herbert, there's a lot of guys and Lamar up until now who have been basically blocked by Patrick Mahomes. Is it as simple as he's the greatest we've ever seen, and you're lucky if you beat him in most years?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. He won't likely have near the longevity that Brady had. So even after Mahomes' career, it's possible you could make the case that Brady was still the greatest of all time. But I think in terms of quality of play over the course of his career, nobody in the history of the NFL has done the job of quarterback better than Patrick Mahomes has done for the last 6 years. And that's just a tough thing to run into every year. Like, it's a team game. There's 22 guys on the field at a time. And every year, other people have a shot. This year, like, the Ravens are favored to win this game. The Ravens could be the AFC representatives this year, but every year is going to require the best out of every AFC contender as long as Mahomes is healthy. And that's just the reality that they're going to face for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we tell ourselves the same story about the Chiefs' flaws, and they don't look right. And then we get to fucking January, and Mahomes is in the Final Four again, and it's like he might go to his 4th Super Bowl, which is insane. Let's talk about the AFC Championship game. Kansas City at Baltimore. I guess the injuries that are the biggest ones to watch are, will Marlon Humphrey or Mark Andrews be back? And then Joe Thuney got hurt in that game against the Bills. Suma, I want to start with you. Who's the more important player to get back for Baltimore, Marlon Humphrey or Mark Andrews? And is Joe Thuney a bigger injury than we're making it out to be, just given how much instability they've had at tackle this year between Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor, who is a penalty machine?
First question, absolutely Mark Andrews. I don't think that the style of offense that the Chiefs are playing right now, and especially played against Miami and yesterday against the Bills, really requires having top tier talent at the cornerback position. I don't think that the Chiefs will consistently go after those cornerbacks. So absolutely, Mark Andrews. I think you just want to score points and points and points, and then try to let Patrick Mahomes drop back, and then let Mike McDonald somewhat cook in terms of how far you can cook against Patrick Mahomes. But I think that's going to be the recipe for the Ravens. You cannot get empty drives this week. So Mark Andrews would absolutely be my priority over Marlon Humphrey. On the other side, yes, Tony might matter because he's super experienced, and Mike McDonald will try to throw everything at that pass protection that he possibly could. So might matter. Do we have any update on Willie Gay?
We don't yet. I didn't bring him up in the discussion because I happen to think Drew Tranquil is a more than capable backup. Whereas with Tooney out, I don't know that they have a great replacement option. But yes, Willie Gay still questionable with the neck injury.
I would probably still want Willie Gay in there against that Ravens rushing attack. I think that's probably a super bad matchup for the Chiefs D after we saw what the Bills did on the ground against them, at least in the first half.
Cleve, the line opened 3.5. We had some money on the Chiefs to the point where it's more of a 3.25 now. A lot of people are saying, this line's not big enough. The Chiefs had played 2 straight decimated defenses. Here's my question. There's no way we get a hook with Mahomes come game day, right? Like, my question is, do we see a normal -3, -110, or do they still have to juice it towards Baltimore?
I don't know. I think this is what people are asking me what I thought the line would be. I thought it would be 3 versus Buffalo and then kind of 3 with juice to the Ravens. So this is exactly where I thought it would be. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be a back and forth kind of all week sort of situation. I mean, I think if you put a blind resume and you didn't know who the quarterback was and you said, what's the line of these 2 teams from this season alone, this line would not be 3, it'd be a lot higher, right? But obviously, it's Patrick Mahomes, so you put, you kind of add that back in and you give them the benefit of the doubt, and so that's why the number kind of is the way it is. And it's just a matter of like how much do you respect Mahomes enough to lay it with the Ravens, even though I think it's pretty clear that the Ravens are the better team, kind of in most facets here. So that's really the situation you've got to put to yourself if you're going to make a bet either way. Do you go with kind of the actual who are the better team? Who's the better team? Who should be laying the higher number? Or is it just I'm just going to back Mahomes as a dog at a field goal or more, no matter what? I don't care who it is or what the situation is, and you've got to make that decision. So I don't know if there's a simple answer. I'm not doing anything with it right now. I don't have any sort of I can see both sides of it. So I just think if we took away the last 2 weeks and is what it is, last 2 games, I think that people would have kind of run to take the Ravens here. If this was after what we saw with that Raiders game on Christmas, and even struggling early, going down big to Jake Browning and the Bengals, you would have run to take the Ravens here at 3.25. But we don't know because the last couple of games that the Chiefs look a lot better and Mahomes pushing it down the field, and we don't know if that's the Chiefs kind of figuring it out or if it's just a product of Miami not having any defensive players left, and same with Buffalo. Their line. Talk about a bad matchup when you've got all your linebackers out versus Travis Kelce in the kind of the middle of the field. It's just a terrible matchup. So you've got to weigh which is kind of true, and I'm not really sure I have an answer. I will say the one thing I'm curious about is the other side of the ball and how Spagnuolo versus Lamar plays out, because Spagnuolo is as good as any defensive coordinator that we've seen in a long time in terms of kind of game planning in these high leverage situations. And I just think you're going to get a lot of cover zero blitzes on Lamar and just let your elite corners kind of go one-on-one with guys like Zay Flowers and see if they can beat them. We know that Lamar has always struggled against the blitz. And if you look at cover zero numbers, and again, the sample size is really small. I mean, he's like 44th amongst quarterbacks in EPA versus cover zero. And we saw D'Amico Ryans really ratcheted up his blitz package in that last game against Houston to the point where second half they really adjusted well and were able to beat it. But Spagnuolo is a different animal. So, and you've got a much better secondary and cornerback room. So that's the one that I'm really curious is how that's going to play out. I don't know. Again, there's so many variables here. I think it's a great chess match. So I'm looking forward to it.
Clark, let's answer Cleve's question. How do the Ravens offense match up to the Chiefs defense?
I think it's a tough matchup for the Ravens, relatively speaking. I mean, if you look at the teams that the Ravens have really dominated, the Lions, the Seahawks, the Bengals, and the Dolphins, and then in the second half against the Texans, all those teams are fairly not blitzing teams. They play a lot of zone. And I think you can say, well, the Texans did blitz, but the thing about that is when you're running defensive looks that you haven't been running all year, you're not at your best, right? So yes, the Texans blitzed Lamar, but that wasn't their natural looks. And so the Chiefs love to blitz. They love to play man. They want to get pressure on the quarterback. And I think Lamar has struggled with that type of defense throughout his career, like TA was saying. The question is going to be how well prepared he is to handle that. Like, what are the counter punches? Can they run the ball? If they can run the ball and win up front the way Buffalo did for most of that game, then I don't think it's going to really matter what coverages the Chiefs face. The Ravens should be scoring on most drives. Because once you get the run game going and have to dedicate yourselves to stopping the running back, now you've got Lamar, he fakes the handoff, he's opening things up and, he's running 20 yards. This is a very difficult offense to face if they can do what they want to do well. So I do think the coverages and the pressure looks will be tough for Lamar, but I think for that to matter, they're going to have to keep him in third and longs. And that's going to be where this game is won or lost, in my opinion. I think that's going to be tough for the Chiefs.
Suma, you brought up, you posted a link behind the scenes of how the Chiefs have gone heavy personnel, and it's worked against Dolphins and Bills team who were gutted up the middle, literally at both safety and linebacker. I can confidently say there is not a better combination of linebackers and safeties in the NFL than the Ravens have between Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen and Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams. This is as good as it gets up the middle of a field. How do the Chiefs offense, how does it match up against the Ravens defense? And what do you expect from them?
Well, it's going to be tough out there. I mean, if you can get Patrick Queen in coverage, that should probably work all day. But there will be tough matchups because Mike McDonald likes to mix up his coverages like on a snap-to-snap basis. Lots of zone coverage, lots of disguises, creeper, stuff like that. So the matchup that the Chiefs might be looking at pre-snap might not be there post-snap. So I think in general, the Chiefs might still be able to run a little bit on the Ravens team. Ravens completely shut down the Houston Texans run game, but I think that Andy Reid might bring a slightly different dimension to it after we saw what he did yesterday against the Bills. In general, I think it will just come down to Patrick Mahomes dropping back and giving his best to dissect that Mike McDonald's post-snap zone coverage. That will be what this game will come down to. Trying to find Travis Kelce in the soft zone spots. I think the Ravens might probably put Kyle Hamilton on him a lot. Then it will come down to Rashee Rice clearing those zones, but it will come down, and as boring as that sound, it will come down to Patrick Mahomes just beating Mike McDonald in this one.
Are these the two best defensive minds right now? McDonald, Spagnuolo. If you had one game on the line and you had to have one DC, I mean, I think those are the two best ones right now. So that's why I think it's going to be pretty fun to see who can dissect the strategies better.
That was my question, Cleve. Casey usually has the coaching advantage when they play between Andy Reid and Spagnuolo. And the Ravens usually have the coaching advantage between Harbaugh, Monken, and McDonald. This is it, right? This is like an animate object versus unstoppable force, or whatever that saying is. There's no real coaching edge here, right? This is going to be just an incredible game.
Yeah, and kick Nagy out. He doesn't deserve to be
listen, anyone who gives Nicole Hardman the ball on the 2-yard line is quite a decision. Let's move on to Detroit and San Francisco. And Cleve, I want to start with you with the injuries. It looks like no Jonah Jackson for this game. And the Lions were already down a guard before. And normally, again, it's an offensive guard. You can adapt when you have such a good O-line. But Arik Armstead and Javon Hargrave is as good as it gets at interior D-line. For San Fran, we got a taste of what their offense looks like without Debo. Now, there's people who are optimistic that he plays. I think it's safe to say he's not going to be 100%. Which injury do you think is more important? How does it affect each team?
Yeah, I mean, if kind of all things being equal, you'd rather have Debo in there. But I do think that the Jonah Jackson injury, and even Frank Ragnow came back and played, so I'm sure he'll play. But man, he's not 100%, and that's not what you want to have. I mean, this is a tough matchup in general for Jared Goff in this offense, going on the road to a defense that his bread and butter is kind of peppering the middle of the field. We know that, like, that's where he makes his hay. He's one of the top 5 in the NFL, both in EPA and just attempts over the middle. But the Niners are number 1 in defending the middle of the field with Fred Warner over there kind of roaming. So that's just a bad matchup just in general. If you look at some of the opponents that Goff has faced this year, he struggled the most. I think 3 of his 4 worst EPA games have come against other defenses that are top 10 in defending the middle of the field. Like, that's like his kryptonite. And then if you're going to include the fact that, your center is banged up and your guard could be out, and you're looking at, a big kind of downgrade as a Kyoto Awaska, is that his name, that came in there and struggled. We saw Kalijah Cansey get some pressure yesterday. So I think that's tough against a guy like Armstead and Hargrave, et cetera. So I just think the combination of the two makes this a really tough matchup for Goff in general. So even if Debo's not out there, I don't necessarily think you need to put up 30 points to win this game necessarily. So, and you've got enough weapons. And I think Jennings is a solid player. I mean, obviously it's not Debo. We're not saying that. But, Jennings and McLeod and guys are pretty versatile. And you've got, obviously McCaffrey and Ayuk and Kittle. You have plenty of weapons. So I don't think, against some other teams, it might be an issue, but I'm not sure against this Lions defense, which is not going to put up much of a fight, I don't think. I don't think it's as necessary.
The comments has just been on fire, and I appreciate all the engagement, guys. And if you haven't done so yet, please like this content. It really helps boost us in the algorithm. Clark, you and I watched a lot of film this year, and I remember we had a conversation early in the year, and I told you who I thought the Lions offense reminded me of was the Saints once upon a time, where they can establish the run and put it on you in ways that they want, but they also work inside out. The Saints did it with Marquise Colston and Jimmy Graham, and I think the Lions do it with Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. How does this Lions team match up against the 49ers, who, if anything, their weakness is on the outsides, which Jordan Love was picking apart, and they're very strong up the middle because of Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw? How are the Lions going to move the ball when the strength of their offense is the strength of the 49ers defense?
Yeah, they're going to have to win up front. I think this game pretty much comes down to whether or not the 49ers get pressure on Goff. We've seen how good Jared Goff is when he has time to operate in the pocket. Yes, the middle of the field will be tougher. The San Francisco linebackers are incredible in coverage. That's going to be tough for the Lions. But if Goff has all day back there, he's going to find someone. These plays are designed to get people into space. And if it's not the middle of the field, it's not optimal. He'll still find people on the outside. Amon-Ra will get open on the outside against these corners. But if Jared Goff doesn't have time to operate in the pocket, then it could get really tough for the Lions. And I think if it also matters how well the 49ers do on offense, which is why I think Debo actually matters a ton to this spread, because he matters a lot to this offense. And the more likely it is that the 49ers can put scoreboard pressure on the Lions the more likely it is the Lions are going to have to abandon the run game. And that's not good for what the Lions want to do, where you're relying on Goff play after play after play. So I think there's kind of a exponential impact here to the spread based on Deebo's availability, and also whether it's raining, which I don't think it's supposed to be raining, so hopefully that's not an issue. But assuming the 49ers are at full strength with Deebo and it's dry, I don't think the Lions defense matches up very well against what the 49ers want to do. And then that could end up having repercussions on how effective the Lions offense is. So I was excited to, about the idea of backing the 49ers, but my numbers made it closer to like 5.5. So I think the number coming out at 6.5 was everybody already sees the things that I'm talking about right now. And so I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't any value on this one. So it's kind of about right for me.
Suma, we've been talking about for months how the Lions defense doesn't match up quite well against anybody. San Fran, I look at this and I'm like, oh, San Fran's going to do everything they want, right? If San Fran wants to run it down their throat, they're probably going to have success. And if they want to throw the ball, they're probably going to have success. How does the Lions put up any resistance against this 49ers offense?
Doing some rain dances and swear to the rain gods that it's going to be raining, because I agree with everything that Clark has said. If it's dry, if it's Deebo in, I'm majorly concerned with that defense. I just don't see how they would generate too many stops against this offense. I mean, last week or Saturday, we saw the Niners defense probably at their absolute bottom in terms of what they are capable of, and that included Wayne, that included Deebo getting out at some point. I mean, Brock Purdy, there were some throws that were not even in the same ballpark of his targets, and I mean, dry game, Deebo in, good luck, Lions defense.
Yeah, Cleve, there's one clear coaching edge here, right? Because Ben Johnson's a fantastic play caller, but Steve Wilkes is no slouch. He may not be a top end defensive mind, but he's got enough talent to put some resistance. Kyle Shanahan on Aaron Glenn has to be a gigantic mismatch, or is it Dan Campbell's aggression versus Kyle Shanahan's passiveness at times? Like, are we going to see the Dan Campbell kitchen sink game here? Fake punts, right? He has to steal some possessions against the 49ers here. Even with that, do you think the 49ers just have too large a coaching edge?
Yeah, I mean, I think Shanahan versus Aaron Glenn to me is more of a, we talked about this last week, like he's a really good players coach, like this, more of a CEO type than I think strategy wise defensively, like, nothing that there, let's be honest, the Lions are last in yards per play allowed the last, month and a half or so. Guys like Nick Mullins have thrown for 400 yards. Baker looked like an all-pro yesterday for the most part. The only times they show any resistance is either, a bad pass by the quarterback, like an interception that, now that was a great play, the last play of the game. I'm not going to take that away from Barnes, but in general, turnovers and just the offense's inability to capitalize on long drives the last couple of weeks have saved this defense. And some of that is just the home crowd that they're not going to have this week. You're not going to have that ability to not be able to check and all those sorts of things that great Detroit crowd had in the Dome. So you lose all those things on the road. And Dan Campbell's going to have to steal possessions, no doubt, but Kyle Shanahan has to be smart enough to realize that's coming. So every punt, like, don't even try and block a punt, just play safe. I would play safe on every punt. And then just assume that there's going to be, a possibility that could be a fake. So they're going to have to do something to, I think, keep up here because we've seen the Lions, I don't think it's going to be another Ravens game, but we saw kind of a similar setup in that regard, where just completely outmatched. So I think Campbell's going to have to do something.
Yeah, I think if the Lions are going to get something defensively, C.J. Gardner-Johnson has been quietly one of the best ball hawks in football the last couple of years. He is a turnover machine. They were missing him for a lot of the season, in the second half of the season, and he's back, and he got a pick, and he threw it at Baker and let him know that he picked him after trash talking him. Like, we've seen at times Brock Purdy can be bad, but that was with conditions, right? This is a lot more optimal, bad defense and dry conditions. If the Lions put up any resistance defensively, I think CJ Gardner-Johnson's going to have to play a role and maybe steal a pick or two. All right, guys, I think we did a good job previewing the games. It's so tough, right? By the time we get to the AFC NFC Championship games, the lines are fairly efficient. They're sitting on like 3 and 7, like the most key numbers, and it feels like you're limited in your betting options. But I think at the very least, we better informed everybody today who was listening. As a reminder, Forward Progress will be back again Thursday at 2 p.m. with our prediction show with Rob Pizzola, Eric Eager, Suma, and Hitman giving you their best bets. And you know what? Those guys are all going to be on cloud 9 because I think they clean swept their best bets last week, unlike a lot of other people in the media who got clean swept the other way. That's it for me. Thanks to Cleve TA. Thanks to Suma. Thanks to Sharp Clark. Thanks to producer Jason. And thanks to you, the audience, who have been great all show. Until next time.